We have two formats for participation, the Zoom web application as well as teleconference. Before we begin, I want to review some guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. These are very important, so I ask that you pay close attention. Please silence your other communication devices such as your cell or desk phone. This will ensure that we're not hearing any feedback or causing interruption during the meeting. During the meeting, all participants on Zoom, except for board members and AQMD staff, will be placed on mute by the host. That means that you will not be able to mute or unmute your lines manually. After each agenda item, the chair will announce for public comment. For those on Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, excuse me, please click on the participants button on the bottom of your screen. A list of participants will appear on the right side of the screen. At the bottom of the list, please click on the gray raised hand button. This will signal to the host that you would like to provide a public comment and you will be added to the list. If you're using Zoom on your smartphone, a new screen will pop up with the list of participants. Look for the raised hand button on the screen. For those calling in using the phone line only, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you would like to comment. Your name will be called when it's your turn to comment, and the host will unmute your line automatically. Please note, you can hang up or leave the Zoom meeting at any time. Also, please adhere to the speaker time limit. Please treat others with courtesy and civility and respect the public meeting process. Rule prohibiting the use of signs or posters remain in effect for video participation. Profanity, discriminatory comments, or obscene gestures is prohibited. Disorderly or unruly or aggressive behavior that infringes upon the rights of others or disrupts the good working order of the meeting is also prohibited. Any violation of the above rules can result in your mic being mute, your video feed shut off, or you being dropped from the phone or Zoom meeting lines. Council member, the meeting is yours, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us. Staff, when you do a roll call vote, just so we know, make sure everyone online, we want to do that, Bay? Yep.
Yes.
So if staff can do a roll call.
Thank you. Councilmember Benoit?
Here.
Senator Delgado?
Here.
Board Member Krakoff?
Sure.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Here.
Supervisor Perez?
Sure.
And Supervisor Rutherford?
Present.
Thank you.
Very good. If that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting order. We'll go into the first item, the summary of proposed amended rule 1117, emissions from container glass melting and sodium silicate furnaces. So Michael Morris, I see you're probably taking this.
Yes, good morning.
Right.
I'll be doing a brief presentation on Rule 1117. If we can go to the next slide. So Rule 1117 regulates container glass furnace emissions, NOx emissions, and they're depicted on the right-hand side what a container glass manufacturing facility is like. We only have one of these types of facilities in the South Coast Basin, and right now they're subject to reclaim. So really the rule currently doesn't apply to any facilities. However, the proposed rule amendment will implement our 2016 AQMD control measure CMB05 to create a command and control regulatory structure for these types of facilities, and it will implement AB 617 by conducting BARCT for these types of facilities. Next slide, please. So we will be expanding the applicability of the rule to include sodium silicate manufacturing. In total, there'll be 3 facilities subject to the rule. I mean, excuse me, 2 facilities subject to the rule with 3 large furnaces. There'll be some other miscellaneous equipment also subject to the rule. And it may seem a bit unusual to have a rule that would only be subject to 2 facilities. However, the facilities have these 3 rather large furnaces that account for 0.8 tons of NOx per day emissions. Next slide, please. So we went through the BARCT assessment process, looking at the national permits and technology that's available for this type of equipment. However, we were very fortunate that the two facilities that are here in South Coast are really state-of-the-art for their control equipment. And so we are establishing BARCT limits that represent the maximum degree of reductions achievable. And in this case, it's achievable by the two facilities here in the district. Next slide, please. So in 2017, these facilities installed a selective catalytic reduction technology that uses ceramic filter elements, and essentially, and it's oversimplifying a little bit, but it's a traditional SCR technology combined in a bag house type structure. And with that, they're able to realize exceedingly good emission reductions. Next slide. Thank you. So we're on slide 6 now. For the container glass melting furnace, by the installation of this equipment, we saw a 90% reduction of NOx emissions in each of their two furnaces. For the sodium silicate furnace, we saw an 85% reduction. And I just want to point out, if you notice the rather steady operations, and these graphs show the emissions over a very long period of time, months. The very steady emissions for the glass container facility, and that's because they operate continuously. And while it only shows a few months here, their operations go for 15 to 18 years without stop, with minor idling periods. Whereas the sodium silicate furnace, they'll run 3 months on and 3 months off, and that will play into some of the limits that you'll see in the future, and also our startup and shutdown criteria. So just keep that in mind as we go on. Thank you. Next slide. So we established the limits based on what they're essentially doing right now. All we tried to do is codify their current levels of emission. And so for the NOx, for the furnace of the container glass, we'll be proposing as 0.575 pounds of NOx per ton of glass pulled. That's essentially including some additional, we had originally proposed 0.25 pounds of NOx pulled per ton of glass pulled. However, the facility came back to us and said, you know, this is new equipment. We don't know how it's going to work after 15 to 18 years. So we're a little bit concerned about aging, and they also requested a compliance margin. And so we looked back and we did verify that in fact the emissions do occur, increase through aging. So we did change to 0.75 pounds of NOx per ton of glass pulled. And then the rest of the limits basically codify where they are right now for NOx and SOx. The NOx limit for auxiliary equipment comes into effect when they next replace that equipment, which could be several years down the road. Next slide, please. So for the other proposed amendments, they basically focus on startup, shutdown, and idling. And you may note that there are rather long periods of time where they're in startup, shutdown, and idling. During this time, their control equipment doesn't function as it would under normal operation. The reason why the periods are so long is because with glass melting or sodium silicate manufacturing, there's a long period of time needed to make sure that the furnaces aren't damaged or the quality of the product is not affected. So they ramp up very slowly, taking essentially weeks or months to ramp up to operating temperature, and the same as it goes down to a shutdown. Next slide, please. So with the proposed amendments, what we're expecting is a 0.55 tons of NOx reduced per day. The cost effectiveness, we use the costs that the facilities provided to determine the cost effectiveness. I guess it should be pointed out that this is already in place, so we're not expecting any new equipment to be put in or changes to or additional costs beyond that. This is just representing the costs that they did occur back in 2017. Next slide, please. So with that, we're proposing to bring this rule to the board in the June public hearing. And thank you. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Very good. Board member questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have one question.
Councilmember Mitchell, please go ahead.
As the district calculated the reductions that we need of NOx per day to meet our attainment deadlines?
So I'm not entirely sure. We have calculated how many tons we need to meet our AQMD requirements, but I'm not sure I can answer for attainment.
What is the answer for the AQMD requirement?
So we're looking to reduce 5 tons of NOx per day.
Per day, okay.
I see Dr. Fine has his hand raised. Maybe he has the answer. Dr. Fine?
Yes, I was just unmuted. So Mayor Mitchell, that's a good question. Overall, across the board, all sources, we know we need on the order of 100 to 130 tons per day. But as you know, 80% of that comes from mobile sources. The entire reclaim universe right now is on the order of maybe 15 to 20 tons a day. And the goal is to get that down to about 9.5 tons a day in the next few years with the transition. So this 0.5 is significant considering it's only 2 facilities.
Yeah, right. That's what I was wondering. Okay. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I know that that is daunting to think we need somewhere between 100 and 130 tons per day of NOx reductions. And Phil, that is to meet the federal deadline, or?
Yeah, so there's several federal deadlines, but the 2023 deadline, it's about 120 tons per day, above and beyond all existing rules and regulations. And we submitted that to EPA at the end of last year, a update to that with the contingency measure plan. But then there's future deadlines too in 2031 and 2037, and those will require even additional reductions. But we feel like we're on track to meet our commitments in the coming years on the reclaim transition and those reclaim sources.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Any other board member questions or comments? I have a question. Where are these 3 facilities located? I'm just curious.
So 2 facilities, and they're located in near Los Angeles.
Near city of Los Angeles.
Near the city or in the city?
Yes, near the city. I'm sorry.
Like Vernon, maybe?
Yeah.
Vernon?
Vernon.
Okay. All right. Any other board member questions or comments? If not, this is just an informational receive and file item.
Public comment, sir.
Quick comments?
Yep. Thank you. I'll ask for that. Do we have any public comments? If you're on the phone, you're going to hit *9. If you're on Zoom, you're going to hit the raise hand function that's under the participants list. I'm not seeing any raised hands at this time or hearing anyone speaking up. All right. Well, that's our only actual item on the board. We have our written items that are also attached. Anyone have any questions on the written report items, items 2 through 4?
No.
All right. we're all making this pretty easy today. I have other matters from our board members. Anyone have any other issues to bring up? If not, I'll go to public comment. Do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda? Again, if you're on the phone, you would hit *9. If you're on the Zoom meeting, you would hit the raise hand button. All right. Well, with that, we can go ahead and move to adjournment. Our next meeting will be on May 15th. We have Technology Source Committee coming up after this, correct, Wayne?
Yes.
All right. So other than that, everyone have a great weekend. And thank you for a rather expeditious meeting. Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
safe. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff.
Safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.